But there are ways in which they could improve on the formula, whether in its current state or in a future release of the game. So I'm gonna flip the script and talk about the good first. What's good about this game? It's a pretty great cooperative game. It's your typical survival crafting game with combat mixed into it. You can have a good number of people within your lobby. You all can task yourself to accomplish different goals within the same world. So a person could be the primary farmer and fort designer, and somebody else could be the fishing guy, the gardening guy, and the cooking guy. And then you can have people who just generally explore the world, mining, fighting, discovering new biomes. There's also skill trees that kind of look, if anything, look very similar to the skill trees that you'd find in something like RuneScape of all things, where the more you initiate with a certain action, it'll level up that skill. So say, if you're leveling up your melee combat, the more enemies you hit with a melee weapon, the more experience you get within the melee combat skill. Each skill tree, which is about 9 of them in the game right now or so, go up to level 100. Every 5 levels, you get a perk point, which you can allocate to a very small but detailed perk tree within each of the skills. And they range from things like range combat, melee combat, mining, crafting, cooking, fishing, even just the basic running. You can level up so that you can move faster, and you'll get special passive perks applied to running abilities. All this said, I really like this system. The music, while it's understated for the most part, if you put it on in the background, even outside of the game, it's very fitting for background music to do things like getting some work done, or maybe you're trying to meditate or anything like that. It's a very moody, it sets a very specific tone with its quality. And lastly, the bosses. All the bosses are designed differently in how to overcome each of them. At this point, I've gone through 3 of the bosses. The first 3 within the 3 biomes before unlocking the next 3 biomes. And each of them focus on very specific things. Like the slime boss has you focused on how to avoid getting caught within the slime ground so that you don't get slowed while he's stomping on you. Or Gorm, which is this giant worm that circles around the map the whole time. The main strategy for that is very particular that I will discuss in a little bit. All these things make each boss fight feel different. They have very different mechanics, and overall it gets you to be able to work more efficiently with your co-op partners so that you can overcome these obstacles. But with that said, we're playing on mostly the hard difficulty on our current file. I have my friend who's in charge of the world, so he's the one that sets it up and sends out the game ID, which always changes every time you reopen your world. So if anything, that helps with security measures to make sure no random people show up in your world. We've probably put at the most 20 hours into this world, and we're already up to the next 3 biomes. We're about to start working on the Galaxite ore, which there's some slight spoilers I'll get into in a bit. And overall, it's been a good time just going in there weekly or maybe even twice a week, just getting things done, working on getting more ore, upgrading our equipment, getting more workbenches, unlocking more features within the game, because this game is just an endless well of features. And that's my main argument for why I don't understand how this game is early access still, because I think the best way to put it is, this is not an early access game, but it is an early access. So now here comes some of my gripes. So first off, I feel like there's a disconnect with the progression when it comes to each of the components of the game. Leveling up feels very natural, especially when you get into later levels of each skill tree. It takes longer and it feels a lot more rewarding the further you get into a skill tree, the closer you get to level 100. Every time you get a level, it feels good, because then the stat bonuses just feel that much more significant. When you come across every new boss, it feels like it's a new challenge that presents itself that you have to kind of tinker and think of a solution to how to defeat them. What doesn't feel that way is the exploration and the mining part of it. When you're gaining new ore and whatnot as you're exploring the new biomes. You know, we started off in the dirt biome for quite a while. We were there for a bit. We killed the first boss. In the middle of that, I found the clay zone, and we were working towards getting some tin ore. And then my friend suddenly decided he wanted to go east. And when he went east just a little bit further outside of where Gorm's path was, he ended up finding out there was the stone biome, the old ruins right there, right across. There weren't really many enemies at that point, so we got to work on those walls. Even with our copper pickaxes, we were able to get iron ore just enough for us to just kind of skip past the upgrade path in tin ore. And then we had to work our way backwards after a little while when we realized, you know, we needed certain workbenches in the tin part to get things like our mine carts and our railroad tracks going. But either way, we kind of just skipped over tin for quite a while because we just had enough iron ore that we had found that was so close by. And then the same thing happened after Scarlet ore, where we found octarine ore within that specific biome. But then immediately after we had made our octarine pickaxes, we went back and we saw that galaxite ore was pretty close by to the other biome on the west side of our map. So now we're just working on trying to find a deposit of galaxite ore, and we haven't even made not even like 50% of the things you can make with the octarine workbench. I think that's an issue. That's just how I feel. I feel like there was no logical progression between each of the biomes and gaining more equipment and features within the game. It just kind of felt like things were just getting lumped into us if we were just lucky enough to find the right materials at the right time. Granted, the game locks you out from getting things past iron ore until you beat the first 3 bosses, but as soon as that happened, you know, we were stuck on Scarlet ore for a while because we had to get our automation going. But then soon after we got the automation going, we were fast tracking octarine, and now we're going into galaxite, and it just felt like we were done with octarine in like half a day of playtime. So I think that's a big issue. I don't know if it can be addressed within this game. You know, for me, this game already has a lot of features in it, and if this is something that can get tackled adequately enough and not slow the game down for its official release finally, then I'd be okay with it. Lastly, what is this system with the roadmap, right? You look on the Steam page and there's a roadmap that kind of plots out what they're doing for early access. They have 90% of that already completed. 90% of that roadmap is checkmarked as incomplete. It's in the game, and I can verify it by just going in the game and, you know, interacting with these features that they have listed on the roadmap. They have one more thing that they need to implement, but the game is on like version 0.5.127. You get the drift, right? Most early access games are set up to prepare for its launch, which is generally a version 1.0 release, right? That would be the official launch of a game. This game is in 0.5. It's got 90% of the roadmap done on the Steam page. It's in early access. And then when is version 1.0 coming? Is that just not the case? Are we getting a version 0.6 as the full release and then build up towards 1.0 like post-launch? I'm not sure what happens there. If anybody knows exactly what's going on, because I don't interact with the direct channels for this game, like it's Discord or with the developers directly. If anybody has direct answers for that, let me know. Because aside from those small issues and some weird things like putting up a wooden fence when you're looking north or south with your character, you can like clip through whatever like wall or wedge that it's set up between. You can like wedge through a wooden fence. Even that's very small. This game is very solid. Does it like inspire devs to kind of like do their own thing? I'd say to some extent it can. I think that it does a lot of cool things like the skill tree stuff and exploration and building up a fort with a bunch of people, as well as the customization of your furniture. It does that stuff very, very well. I really like that stuff. It helps you personalize your experience, as well as develop a certain community with the people that you're playing with. But the progression I've been feeling, while it's not a stagnating progression, it's very inconsistent. We kind of just skipped over a couple of ores before having to go back to them, and to me, that just doesn't make a lot of sense. And lastly, the Gorm boss. Gorm boss I get what they're going for with that boss and what it's supposed to teach you, but I don't like how it's been executed. I feel like, especially when we're playing on hard, where 2 hits from a normal slime will kill you unless you have iron armor. With this boss, he will just one-shot you, and he is like, he covers like 70% of the screen when he shows up. So you have to set up like hundreds, and I mean like hundreds of spike traps on the floor, which the game admittedly won't really teach you how to make these things. You kind of have to find this out for yourself through the tin workbench, that you set up hundreds of these spikes before he makes his path around again, and you have a bunch of bombs that you've created through the alchemy workbench, so that when he comes around, he's gonna run over the spike traps and completely disarm them, but before he does that, they're going to trigger and they're going to hurt him for a bunch of damage with all of those spike traps. And then you just spam bombs on him, because if you get too close, you will definitely get skidded off the road and splintered off into multiple pieces. We lucked out because my friend had a ranged fireball staff that he was able to clip Gorm out and kill him completely, but I think this could be better implemented. I'm not going to say how, I'm not going to say just do this or that, but I do feel like it wasn't very satisfying figuring out the solution for the boss. But overall, this was a pretty good game, and get the fuck off of early access already, please.